Hey, it's time for Dotnet Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers. In New London, Connecticut, I'm your host, Carl Franklin, and Mark Dunn in Atlanta. But he's not in Atlanta. Where are you, Mark?
I am in Montgomery, Alabama tonight.
Back in Montgomery.
That's right, in the Deep South.
Deep South. Have the bugs come out yet?
Yeah, I drove one to work this morning.
Hey, you know what? I don't know if you heard the news this week, but or last week, but Rox Press is going belly up.
That's hard to believe. I mean, you know, they're one of the best publishers out there.
Well, they certainly very prolific. I mean, they've published hundreds of books in a small amount of time. They really have quite a variety. And yeah, true story. Apparently, the parent company is filing for Chapter 11, and so much for Rox. And from what I heard, I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe somebody could call in and tell us. But all the outstanding royalties are just going up in smoke.
Yeah, that's really bad news for those authors out there.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't write a book with them.
Yeah, no kidding.
So what have you been doing this week, Mark?
I'm teaching an ASP.NET class for the state of Alabama.
This isn't the 3-day class where that you use for a doorstop, is it?
Oh, no. This is a good 5-day class.
Awesome.
If anyone's out there taking a mock Microsoft class, number 2310 is a joy.
Cool.
Really good material.
Great. Well, it's Ancient History Week here on .NET Rocks, isn't it?
Absolutely, man. I'm excited, as you all know, about tonight.
It's very exciting for me because one of my good friends and mentors and another good friend who came later in my experience are both on the line tonight. We're talking about the history of BASIC as a language, and going to go back in time a little bit and hear some stories from people who were there. Will you please welcome the founder of Crescent Software, one of the first, if not the first, tool vendor for Quick Basic, Visual Basic, and Basic 7 PDS, and then eventually Visual Basic, as I said, Ethan Weiner, and from PowerBASIC, which a guy who also wrote Turbo Basic for Borland, Bob Zale. How are you guys?
Okay. Just wonderful. Thanks for inviting us.
Oh, well, this is like incredible experience for me because I remember talking to both of you guys on a couple of occasions, but it's not often that I get to talk to both of you at the same time.
Yeah, I've never really talked to you, but I've used your products for a long time. I really never used Turbo Basic, Bob, but I used you wrote a PowerBASIC DLL compiler that I just wore the thing out. It was great.
Well, that's good to hear.
So let me start with you, Ethan. You obviously were my first boss in this industry, and well, not obviously, not a lot of people know that. But I went to work for Crescent Software right before you had published QuickPack Professional for Windows, right?
Probably something like that.
Yeah. But even before that, you had been in business with Crescent Software since about when?
Well, I started the company in October of 1986. That was when the first ads I placed in PC Magazine came out.
Uh-huh. And you were developing assembler libraries, right?
That's right. The first library was mostly assembly language routines. There were 60-some-odd routines, and 50, 60, something like that. It grew very quickly over the first couple of months, and most of it was written in assembly language. That was the key part. And unlike all of the other libraries that were out there at the time, C libraries and Pascal libraries and other languages, most of the libraries were $350 or more, and you got object modules and minimal documentation. And
right.
I wanted to do something. I wanted to go the extra mile, and I also wanted to make it affordable. I wasn't going to pay $350 for some sorting routines and some ways to get a list of file names off the disk and some basic services like that. And I figured that most of the people that were like me and thought like me wouldn't want to pay that kind of money either.
Right.
And I even went the extra mile and included all the assembly language source code.
Right.
And wrote that little booklet, the Assembly Tutor, that then got expanded into one of the chapters of my basic a techniques book that I wrote for PC Magazine.
What version of QuickBasic was around back then that you were writing for?
That was version 2. That's when I jumped on the bandwagon. I had been using the BASCOM 1.0 compiler to compile. Well, I was writing programs professionally, custom programs for people, and that was the big fancy IBM version. Though of course it was written by Microsoft, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
And I knew QuickBasic came out, QuickBasic 1, and I don't remember the pricing or the dates and all the exact details, but I remember that it wasn't that compelling an improvement.
So BASCOM was before QuickBasic, is that the deal, or?
Yes, yeah, that was around, I think, pretty much since the beginning of the IBM PC. Bob probably has a better handle on that because he's been doing this longer than I have.
Yeah, Bob, what were you doing about that time?
Oh, well, I actually started in the business in the 70s.
Wow.
It started out as a toy, as a hobby for me, doing utility programs and utility things and such, disk editors and programming editors and such, until we decided to get into the compiler business around 1980.
Were you pretty much coding in assembler back then?
Oh yeah, everything has been an assembler since day one.
Yeah,
you were programming with an abacus back then, probably.
Pretty close. I could tell you stories. We had times when when we were developing the first compiler, where it literally took 6 to 7 hours to link a program.
Oh man!
Wow.
Link the compiler together, simply because it required so many floppy changes all the way, because it was all done on floppy machines.
Awesome.
We had an interesting time. A full build of that first compiler took 6-7 hours.
Well, that gave you time to polish off a bottle of scotch, right?
You bet.
Now, the BASCOM compiler, that didn't have an environment like QuickBasic, right? It was just a compiler? Or did it?
That's correct. You would write your program in Basic A or GW Basic, and you didn't have to use line numbers, but if you didn't, then, of course, you couldn't test the program
Right.
and debug it. So usually, we would... I always would use line numbers back then, and you'd get the program running the way you wanted in the environment. But unlike the way it is now, where you just push a button and it just hands it off to a compiling phase, that was a separate step that you would save the program and then run the compiler and then run the exe and cross your fingers and hope it all worked exactly as it had in the environment.
So, Bob, when did you write your first compiler?
First compiler was released about 1980.
Wow.
It wasn't even a CP/M compiler. It was written for MDOS, Micropolis Disk Operating System.
What was it called?
It was called Basic Z. Gee, I wonder where the Z came from. But that was the first one for MDOS, and then we moved that to CP/M over the next couple of years.
Uh-huh.
And we had a CP/M compiler until the mid '80s, which is when we were. That's when we got into the TurboBasic area.
Okay.
After Turbo Pascal, and I wrote and we created a much more of a Microsoft-like compiler.
Yeah.
Which became TurboBasic.
And you were hired by Byrne to write that then?
It was actually mostly written before I went with them.
Oh, okay.
But it was, perhaps 60% done when we agreed to kind of team up on that project, and that was released in 1987.
Huh. And so Byrne and Microsoft were obviously competing with QuickBasic and TurboBasic then?
You bet.
Yeah. So what was that like? I mean, what was Microsoft like back then?
A formidable competitor, to say the least.
Yeah.
Marvelous marketing. Along those lines, at that time, we had actually probably fairly similar products.
Yeah, that's true.
But it was a race for a while.
Right.
Had fun with it.
Did you two know each other back then?
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Huh.
I think we met, actually, Ethan and I met about the time for TurboBasic was first released, if I recall. That's my recollection, anyway. Although it seems like I've known you for ages, Ethan.
Yeah. I remember we talked on the phone, and I guess that was before email.
That's pretty much.
But we certainly, I remember we knew each other when we finally met in person. We were like old friends at that point.
That's correct. How true.
Yeah. And Ethan, when did you get the idea to do PDQ? And tell everybody about what that was.
Well, I don't remember exactly when that was.
Yeah, probably it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm not good with years.
Quick Basic 3, maybe?
No, it wouldn't have worked until Quick Basic 4.0, I think, was the first version. So sometime around when that was released, probably 88, 89.
So tell everybody what that was and what you did.
Well, that was actually a very interesting product. The original goal was to write my own BASIC compiler, and not to compete with Bob and not to compete with Microsoft BASIC, but to give people a way to write a small, simple utility programs, things like, at that time, the original Norton utilities, and those were written, I believe, in Turbo Pascal.
Really?
At least the original ones. And there would be useful utilities that were 6K, 10K exe file sizes. And they would recurse all the directories on the disk trying to find the files. So if there was like a where is kind of utility.
Right.
And just a variety of useful utilities. And I wanted people to be able to write that in a BASIC-like language that they already knew without having to learn C. That was when C was starting to make big inroads, and all the really cool guys were using C.
Right.
And only the weenies were still using BASIC. And I knew that that a lot of the overhead that made a Hello World program in BASIC, 20K, didn't really have to be. There's a lot of things get added when you say, if you just say print hello, there's a lot of stuff that gets added to the program that really isn't needed. Code to open a COM port, code to put the screen in graphics mode in case you were going to do that, and just all kinds of extra stuff. And the entire complement of a string, all the string manipulation routines, even if you're not using that, would all get added.
Right.
So the original goal was of PDQ was to write a simple BASIC compiler that would be a subset of BASIC and just do really the most fundamental stuff. That would make really small EXEs, like under a K to start, and you could write real programs that did things at about 5K. And I had Rob Hummel at that time, who was a contributing editor for PC Magazine and a friend, working on that. And he spent about 6 months, and he came up with a sort of almost workable compiler, and it was certainly more advanced than I could do. And at one point, I was looking through his code, and he had done some startup code that got linked in with the main thing. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on and said, we don't need to write a compiler. The BASIC compiler that you get with Quick Basic is actually very efficient. What needs to be written is a new runtime library, the LIB file that gets linked with the compiled program.
Right.
And once that went on, it was just a couple of months to a minimal working thing and realized that, yes, this could be a real product. And by the time, now it's the final version was 3 point something, but so we went through a lot of major revisions.
Right.
But the minimum program size was, I think, 768 bytes for a print hello world, and you could write real programs in 3K, 4K, 5K. I mean, real programs that did real things, almost as small as assembly language. Not quite, because there was still some overhead if you used any string operations, and of course you got all the string manipulation.
And you were always big into telling BASIC programmers not, don't be scared by the C people who tell you you're being weenies, because you don't write C. If you want to do something low level, learn assembler. It's not that much more difficult.
That's right, and much more valuable.
Right.
I mean, C is kind of like has all the difficulty of dealing with assembly language, but none of the benefits. And it's just so much harder than BASIC. So I to this day would prefer, not that I do a lot of DOS programming, but I still do some. I would much prefer to write as much of the program as possible in BASIC.
You could do it in much less time.
Right, and then write custom routines to do whatever needs to be really fast or really small or whatever in assembly language. And to me, that's the ideal combination. Now, of course, everything changes with Windows.
Right.
And I don't know enough about that to discuss that knowledgeably, but I know there's a lot of services.
Well, Bob, you do. I mean, that you guys made the transition when you got Turbo Basic back from Borland to PowerBASIC, and you really embrace Windows. I mean, when you look at PowerBASIC, it's you write Windows applications just like you would in C, and I'm talking about the early Windows applications where you had to create your windows and things like that. And then, now correct me if I'm wrong, but then you started making some higher level utilities. But the basic programming model is the same. Am I right?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, we can create an executable for Windows as little as about 4K.
Yeah, the library that I purchased from you at one point was dedicated just to making DLLs for Windows, and it wasn't the full-blown PowerBASIC compiler, but it met my needs really well because I just wanted to make high-performance DLLs.
Right.
And you couldn't do that in BASIC at that time. I think that was version 3 of Visual Basic I was using.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, guys, hang on one second. We're just going to pay the bills, and I'm going to mention this article that I saw in MSDN Magazine on building Windows forms, controls, and components with rich design time features by Chris Sells and Michael Weinhardt. If you've ever never built a control in Visual Basic 6 or C++, and especially if you haven't built a control in .NET, this is a great introductory article for writing controls, talking about container controls and components, and they talk about the inheritance hierarchy. So inheritance is everywhere in the framework, and these guys do a great job of looking at the different classes in that namespace system Windows forms and talking all about how to make controls. They actually build one, and they bring you along for the ride. You can check it out online at msdn.microsoft.com/msdnmag, or pick up a subscription to MSDN Magazine. You'll be glad you did. Hey, let's get back to our talk with Ethan Weiner and Bob Zale about BASIC and about a PowerBASIC specifically. You may not have ever even heard of PowerBASIC, but Bob Zale's going to tell you exactly what it is, and I think you'll enjoy it. Stick around. Bob, tell us what PowerBASIC is today.
Well, PowerBASIC is a vendor of compilers and a few other tools. We have compilers. We're still actively supporting our DOS compiler. We have 2 Windows compilers that'll create industry standard DLLs that will create complete applications. We have a console compiler, which is our text mode compiler for Windows. Gives you all the power of Windows, but without the need to deal with a fancy graphical user interface if you don't really need it. If you're doing web server apps, you're doing anything that doesn't need a fancy user interface, gives you a simple way to create good solid code right away. And then we also have our regular PowerBASIC version 7 for Windows, which is our GUI compiler. Creates complete applications or DLLs and does it with pretty efficient use. All of our products rely upon the fact that we don't need any external DLLs. We don't need any external runtime libraries of any sort, but we still create everything in one single standalone executable, unless the programmer decides he wants some other separation.
Have you taken a look at .Net, and if so, what do you think about it?
I think it's a very interesting project. We're probably going to support it.
Wow, that's great! I didn't know that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're doing some serious work in that area, and I think it's safe to presume that'll come around.
Wow, that's great news.
In the reasonably near future.
Right. You do think it has a future?
Sure, I do. Absolutely.
I hope so.
Yeah, that's great.
It's still to see for sure exactly what's going to happen. Obviously,
right.
But if I were a betting man, which I am, I think I'd go with it.
Well, Bob, I got to tell you that I used PowerBASIC, and I really want to share this with the listening audience. I used PowerBASIC and I can't remember if it was it wasn't the DLL compiler, it was the EXE compiler. It was still very cheap, and using the basic language and just a few lines of code, I was able to create a Bootstrap install program for the .NET framework. And I have that up on my website, and people have downloaded it and been very appreciative about it. What it is I love the fact that I can write a EXE for Windows that doesn't require anything, any DLL. Only the 3 main system files: user, GDI, and kernel, and that's it. And what I did is I made a little setup program. It's only about 25K that goes out and checks to see if the framework is installed. And, of course, you can run it without the framework being installed. And if it isn't installed, it will run from an any file setting your framework runtime, go through that setup, calling, with a shell command, and it waits until that finishes, and then it calls your setup program. And which, by the way, listeners, the setup and deployment wizard in .NET creates a setup.exe that requires .NET. So when you make a setup.exe, you can't even run that setup unless the framework is installed. So there's no way for that setup to check to see if the framework is there. So that's why you need a little bootstrap program like this. And PowerBASIC, I was able to do it in half a day, and it works great.
Yeah, we're pleased to hear that.
Yeah. So that's up on our website at Franklin's.net. If you click on the .NET Code and Utilities tab on the left, and look for Bootstrapper.zip.
Yeah, and the price is right, isn't it, Carl? It's free.
Oh, yeah, well, that is free. The Bootstrapper is. But tell me how much the PowerBASIC compiler costs these days, Bob.
The DOS compiler is $99. Our console compiler is $169, and our full GUI compiler is $199.
That's cool.
We try to keep it affordable.
Yeah, it's great.
We'd rather make it affordable for lots of folks than an elite few.
That's great.
Yep, that's good. How many users do you have out there of your different compilers?
Oh, in total over the years, it's actually in six figures.
Wow.
But that's a lot of DOS programs. It's a lot of OEM programs and all.
Right.
But we have a lot of users.
That's great. And Ethan, let's get to some stories here, because I know that everybody's just itching to hear some stories from the old days.
Yeah.
If I may, I'd love to tell the story of when I went to Crescent Software for a job interview and the interview process. I tell this story all the time. I was in college and working in New York, and not working in college, and my wife was working in New York, and it was over summer break, and I was just trying to find something to do, and I had been doing some quick basic programming and had found somehow Crescent's tools and PDQ COM, I believe, and PDQ. I had them both. I really liked them, really liked the company, and I was starting to learn assembler. I was getting into it. And Visual Basic 1.0 had just come out, so I picked that up, and I was playing with that. And I called up Crescent in the summer, and I said, hey, I'm looking for a summer job. And they passed me off to Ethan, and he said, you have our products? And I said, yeah. I got PDQ and PDQ COM, and I know them pretty well, and I've done this and I've done that. And he says, do you have Visual Basic? You know that? And I said, yeah, I got that, playing with it. He says, well, you want to come up for an interview? So I said, all right. So the next day, I think I went up there. And it was in your house, right?
That's right, yeah. That was the house I had in Reading. At that time, it was a very large house. We had 11 people in that house.
Yeah. And that wasn't the first house that you had Crescent Software in. The first one was in Stamford, right?
It was always in the house. Well, the first in the beginning was when I was living in Norwalk, renting a third of a house from a woman.
Fairfield County, Connecticut.
That's correct.
So I drive up there to Ridgefield. No, it wasn't Ridgefield. It was West Reading, which is close to Ridgefield.
Right.
West Reading, Connecticut, right above Wilton. And this big house and a huge generator outside. You know what I'm thinking? Man, there's no way that I'm going to get into this company. This would just be too good. I even believe I was late, I think. So we sit down and go into his living room. He's got like guitars and keyboards and stuff all over the place. And of course, I'm a musician. I play guitar and I'm into MIDI. So I immediately said, hey, is this stuff yours? And he says, yeah. I said, oh, cool telly, Telecaster guitar. And he picks it up and he plays this blues riff. And I said, oh, yeah, let me check that out. And I picked it up and I played the same blues riff. He goes, all right. He says, you drink scotch? I said, yeah. He says, you're hired, man.
Well, that's almost how it went.
Almost. And of course, we did have a formal interview. But it was just an amazing coincidence.
Well, I'm not a very formal kind of guy, so I don't know how formal it was, but I think we did probably talk about programming at one point.
Well, anyway, I really loved that environment. I started in tech support and just hanging around with all those guys, and was just an amazing experience and a learning experience. Reading Petzold's book and learning Windows and assembler and understanding things. It was just great. So anyway, that's my story. So I want to hear from you guys, some stories from the field about, about meetings with Microsoft or about the industry in general, the way it was going. Who is Tom Hanlon?
Well, Tom Hanlon had a shareware library that was similar to probably the first version of QuickBack. Though that too grew over time.
Right.
But and it was a competent library for what it was, and I know he had quite a popular following. And at that point, I guess most shareware and freeware stuff migrated through BBSs. There were certainly no websites back then.
Right.
And but he was never competition to us because it was really a different class of product. But at one point, Wayne Hammerly, who was friends with, or I guess approached Tom. Wayne was a user and fancied himself an entrepreneur, and he ended up coming up. The two of them got together and came up with a product to be more competitive in the marketplace with what we were selling and also what MicroHelp was selling at the time.
Right. So you guys, would you say that you, MicroHelp, and maybe Hammerly were pretty much it in terms of commercial libraries at the time?
Yeah, there were a couple of others. But nobody nearly as big as we were. I've always felt that our stuff was better, if not technically better, because, how many ways can you write a routine to read DOS file names?
Right.
But I always thought that our stuff was certainly easier to use. We really aimed to have minimum number of parameters and a lot of examples, a lot of explanations.
That's true.
And we were the only ones including the source code.
Yeah, that really, I learned a lot just from reading the comments in the sample code.
Well, that's right, and that was an important part of it. I remember at that time, one of the other companies, they would sell you the source code for 5 times the cost of the product, but you had to sign 3 copies of something in blood and promise you'd never reveal it. And and I'm a trusting kind of person and never really felt that anything I had was rocket science or top secret stuff, and I was more interested in just sharing and spreading the word and saying, hey, look how easy this is, rather than here's this top secret stuff I have and you're buying intellectual property from me. I never had that kind of an attitude, as I said
and
before.
It paid off too. I mean,
well, it did, and a lot of people really appreciated that, and I got a lot of comments from people that they really enjoyed that.
Right, because even the assembly source code was commented.
Right. Oh yeah. The point being to learn. That did bite us at one point. There was a company that got a startup, and Carl, I think this was before you were working for us, but there was a company that tried to come out with a competing library, and there was one tricky routine that they didn't know how to do, so they stole ours.
Oh no!
And I disassembled their object probably in debug and saw a key thing, and what I did was I used a nonsense name that I made up. And it's not worth getting into the details.
It wasn't like Wow Man, was it?
Right, yeah. It was? Yeah, it was something like, it was...
like Wow.man?
Yeah, something like that. And I would create that on the drive to see if the drive was ready for writing.
That's right. I remember that.
Read test and write test. It would tell whether you could tell if a floppy was in there, and if the write protect tab was on, even if it's in there, doesn't mean that you can write to it.
Right.
And there in their object code was my text. Open this. Try to create this file of course, from assembly language called like Wowman.
Right.
So they went out of business soon after. I called all the magazines and said, please guys, don't review these this product. Don't help these people out.
Right. I remember getting a tech support call from some angry customer who was livid that our libraries would put a file on their hard drive called likewow.man.
Well, I think people thought it was a virus.
Yeah.
But of course, the thing, I'm sure the file got deleted right after the test.
Yeah.
But if you went in with Norton Utilities or some kind of an unerase thing, you could see the trail left behind.
That's very interesting, but I have to tell you, because I don't think you folks even know this, but since you brought up the point, Carl, about Tom Hanlon, Tom is one of our key guys here at PowerBASIC.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep, Tom has been here since, now, try to remember when, 99, I think.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And Tom's one of our key guys, certainly a very talented young man.
Yeah, do you know a guy named Daniel Stasinski, I think was his name?
Oh, sure.
Does that ring a bell? He wrote a windowing library that I used for a long time.
Right, that was PB Vision.
Yeah, that's it.
It was the PowerBASIC version of it. We actually still have that available for our DOS programmers.
Huh. It's a text window kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a text windowing program for DOS. Some of the key ingredients of it that kind of made it popular in the pre-Windows days was the idea that he would remap the character set.
Yeah.
To make it look much more graphically oriented.
Cool.
Of course, you can't do that these days in most cases under Windows.
Right.
So that leaves that out today. But that was one of its key features. But it's still an interesting product. We took it over from him, and we've been selling it for him for years.
Huh.
And it's now gotten to the point where it's really not a fully supported product. We're offering it to our customers for $20. Because it's not a fully supported product, which isn't going to be, that aspect of it's not going to be improved in the future. So we're making it available to, as kind of just a little extra that folks can use.
That's cool.
We still have a lot of DOS programmers out there.
The Hanlon's library, I think, was the first assembler library I ever tried from QuickBasic, and I got it off a bulletin board.
Yeah, that was out before QuickPack. That was one that I was considering trying to do that and do a shareware library, and realized that there was no real money to be made doing that.
Right.
But he was either the first or one of the first to do an add-on compiled basic assembly language routines library.
And this is sort of the precursor to an ActiveX control. I mean, if you think about it in a weird way, the object files that you were creating and the that would be linked in with QuickPack for DOS. Eventually turned into QuickPack for Windows. It was a Windows DLL written in assembly. They took, how many routines was in that thing?
Hundreds.
Hundreds of routines. Little functions that do everything from, format a string to check the drive for reading or writing. I remember there's a great one to check to see if the printer was available, which was a tricky thing because if you try to go out and talk to the printer and it's not there, it'll hang. Little things like that. And they took all these assembler routines for DOS and converted them to a DLL. And that was really one of the first toolkits for Windows that you could get, an add-on for Visual Basic.
That's right. Didn't Jay Monroe do most
Jay
of that
Monroe,
work?
that's right. And he went on to work for PC Magazine,
right.
And a great cartoonist, by the way.
Yep.
Shout out to Jay. Well, he did that and then started writing some custom controls, some VBX controls. And that was about the time that I came in. You had a few controls. You were getting a few. I think I found a couple in the third-party arena, some people who were doing controls and asked them if they wanted to join in. And just started assembling VBX controls with those routines, and then that grew into QuickPack for Windows. MicroHelp had their toolkit about the same time for Windows. But you two were really the first. You and MicroHelp, don't you think?
Yeah, I think we were at just about the same time, and they might have even been a couple of months ahead of us.
Yep.
So I got a story for you. Actually, Ethan, you rescued me from being a COBOL programmer and didn't even know it. But early on, when I first got into to writing basic code, I worked for a company down in Birmingham, Alabama, and I got tasked with writing reports for the LaserJet printer. And I was looking for something that would let me easily handle, I think it's called PCL, the programming language for the printer.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And you had a library that Ron Holcomb wrote for you called LaserPack.
That's right.
That's it.
And I wound up buying that program and getting really well versed in it. I could do anything with a laser printer, and that led to me getting a job. Getting away from that company where I did a lot of COBOL programming and going over to work purely in QuickBasic. And then eventually Basic PDS and then finally Visual Basic.
Yeah, and you know Ron, don't you, Mark?
Yeah, Ron eventually came and went to work for the same company I was working for and worked on a Windows library for us. So yeah, I knew Ron very well. He moved down to Birmingham and lived there for quite a while.
Small world. You may not know this because we're always pushing our master class, but Franklin's Net does a considerable amount of on-site training as well. In fact, in February, I went to Philadelphia to teach a class to 26 people. And this company scouted out all our competitors and sent one programmer to each company that they were considering, and they chose me to come and teach their class. And it was a success. Now listen, we have lots of topics that aren't necessarily on the website that you can choose from to customize your on-site class, including GDI+, .NET remoting, advanced web services, sockets programming, server programming, multi-threaded programming, asynchronous programming, lots of stuff. Even if you don't see something on the board, give us a call and we'll help you customize your on-site class. Hey, isn't this show awesome? I'm just having a ball talking to these guys about the old times. Stick around. We're going to talk about, I don't remember what we're talking about, but stick around anyway. So where did BASIC start anyway, the language? Where was that invented?
Well, I guess the original BASIC goes back to the 60s, doesn't it?
Is it Kurtz and Kemeny at Dartmouth?
Absolutely. That was an interesting language, of course. Didn't they have one character variable names, if I remember? I think you could have 26 variables, if I recall, in that original one.
That was way before my time.
Well, it was before my time, too. That was a good 10 years before I really got interested and I first got interested when, with the PC
right.
world in the 70s.
Right.
That's when it caught my interest, and I got more and more involved from that point on. But we've added quite a bit to BASIC, in terms of PowerBASIC. I mean, PowerBASIC has all of the low-level constructs of C virtually. We have pointer variables, we have dynamic and fixed strings and ASCII Z strings.
Yeah.
All the looping structures one could ask for, and a lot of built-in higher-level things, too, like sorting and array scanning, all built in right into the language.
That's very cool. Whereas QuickPack was sort of, an add-on library, you were building the compiler itself, so you were just adding features right into the language.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And so we kind of took it in two directions that way. But we tried very hard to make it as robust as we could, yet keep the program size down. I mean, that's our motto. I have a little sign on the wall here in my office where I'm sitting right now. It says, smaller, faster, smaller, faster, smaller, faster. And that's the truth. I'm looking at it right now.
Right.
We joke about that a bit, but that is a sign hanging on my wall here.
So that's the whole zen of assembly language is trying to get it down to the least number of cycles, the least number of bytes.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's been our goal all along. So, we make our runtime that gets linked in is very, very granular. So
right.
It's amazing the difference it can make.
But at the same time, you don't make it difficult to use. I mean, the whole idea of BASIC is that it's an easy language to understand and to be productive with. So.
Absolutely. I defy you to go back to a C program you wrote a year ago and really understand what it says.
That's
after
because
a year's
C is
gone by.
That's because C is a write-only language. Right?
Seems that way, doesn't it? I mean, it has its place. Obviously, C is a great language. It has its place.
Sure.
And I wouldn't dream of knocking it in that regard. But BASIC,
it's
a beginner can take a look at it and have a good idea of what's going on right away.
Right.
And you can use pointers if you want to. You can forget about it if you can use all of the extra data types if you wish. You don't have to.
I love string pointers. String pointers are perhaps the most useful kind of pointer you can use in a language like PowerBASIC because you can just, allocate a huge buffer and just walk through it, literally looping, going from this byte to that byte to this byte to that byte,
right.
Analyzing and changing and morphing, and it's going to take, an iota of the time that it would to do like an instir and use mid to replace and append and all that kind of stuff, constantly destroying and creating new strings.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we've done, and you're right. Pointers can make it amazingly fast by comparison,
yep.
And of course the assembler code is too, because we have a built-in assembler in all of our compilers. So you can write as much BASIC or as much assembler as you want. In fact, we even have customers who use our compiler to use it as an assembler. I've heard that many times from folks because they don't have to worry about doing all the structure and setup. Our overhead is fairly low,
right,
on a DLL or an executable, and we've got a full-blown built-in assembler in the language.
Right, with PowerBASIC, you could mix assembly in with your basic.
Oh, absolutely, line by line. You can intermix back and forth. You can write 2 lines of BASIC, 2 lines of assembler, go back and forth all you need to.
That's great.
And it's an interesting combination because you can get the best of both worlds that way.
That's
and
cool.
You can really get the performance if you want.
I don't think Microsoft has much to be worried about in terms of being a threat to the VB language or to .NET at all. I mean, I think PowerBASIC is a great tool that any developer should have in their tool chest to assist when speed is absolutely critical. And you're doing algorithmic kind of programs, you're doing compression, you're doing any kind of encryption, that kind of stuff. Digital signal processing, the stuff where you have to have that assembler speed.
Absolutely. And we have that.
Yeah.
But thank you. That's a wonderful compliment.
Well, it's good.
I
use it and I love it. I even had I have occasion to pull out that Bootstrapper program during my class and show it and the hands go up. Where can I get that? Where can I get PowerBASIC? And so,
well, let me tell you these folks where they can get it. www.powerbasic.com.
Cool.
You might find we have just a recently total redesign on our website.
Cool.
And just in the last several days, and we're very proud of it. But there's a huge amount of information there about our products and about programming in general. We've got a great user forum section where there's over 100,000 messages today from programmers in all facets of programming, and a lot of great information that I think your listeners might find interesting and attractive.
Hey, Bob.
I'd like to invite them all to come and visit us.
Hey, Bob, do you have any PowerBASIC success stories, programs written with it that we might recognize, or things that have been important that have been done with it?
Well, there have been any number. We have an interesting page on our website with a list of about 400 of our customers, some of whom just might surprise you. Everyone from NASA to Rolls-Royce to Jaguar Motor Cars and Ford and all of the aerospace industry.
Wow.
NASA uses it in the shuttle project. It's quite an interesting customer list.
I'm looking at it right now. This is incredible. 3M, AT&T, American Express, Abbott Laboratories, Adaptec, Adaptive Electronics, AMD, Aetna, Allergent, and that's just not even a fifth of the A's.
In fact, let me tell you about one of our users that we're very proud of, Jim Byrne.
Okay.
You probably don't know his name, but he was the chief architect of the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars project.
Oh, wow.
Even though the project never went to completion because of hardware issues and a variety of other things, which I am not really privy to, but he wrote a complete model of the Strategic Defense Initiative, the complete missile defense system. He had a working model of it written in PowerBASIC for the federal government.
That's incredible.
That's great.
And that's Jim is recently deceased, unfortunately. We lost him. He became a good friend after he worked on this project. We spoke a number of times while he was doing it, and he's an incredible man. Just incredible. His son, Brad Byrne, is one of our customers right now, and one of the frequent folks who we see on our website, on our forums all the time. But Jim wrote that complete package, and he was just dedicated to PowerBASIC. We loved him for that, of course.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, Bob, I'm curious about something. You go back into the late 70s working with computers and BASIC. Did you ever work on was it the MIPS Altair that Bill Gates first wrote a BASIC compiler or interpreter for?
Actually, I owned one, and I have to tell you, I never got it to work for too long. But that was when I first got interested. My first exposure to personal computers was that Popular Electronics article in the 70s, when they first described the Altair PC. I guess it wasn't called the PC. What was it called back then?
A hobbyist computer, I think, is...
Yeah, but that was what first piqued my interest. And we, before long, I was producing some, minor commercial programs at the start, and then decided that the world really needed a better BASIC, and so I did do that. And been doing it ever since, quite happily.
Cool.
Yeah, I remember the first computer I ever did a BASIC program on was a TRS-80, and I had to save it to a cassette drive. It didn't have a hard drive in it.
Those were some good days.
Yeah, I cut my teeth on a TRS-80 Model 4, which was, a Rolls-Royce compared to the early ones.
Well, mine go back to the Altairs and the IMSI. I had an IMSI. Southwest Tech Products was the first. That was a 6800 based machine. That was the first machine that had a bootstrap in PROM. And that was in the days still of cassettes. I fondly remember the days of loading interpreters from cassettes. We had a lot of fun with that.
All right, I got a question for both of you. This is going to be great. Ethan, what was the craziest tech support call you ever got?
Oh, geez, I don't remember back 15 years, but...
Oh, come on. There's got to be one that sticks out.
Well, I remember some of the people that would call.
Right,
Because we certainly had people that would... It was easier for them to call us than to look in the manual or to apply a little bit of thinking. And that was certainly irritating because we included... tech support for free. This was before anybody even thought of charging for tech support, which is, I guess, pretty common now. $30 per incident. We would have made a killing just on a couple of guys.
Right.
But you probably remember some of those people. I don't really want to make fun of.
Yeah, there was one guy. I won't say his name, but he was a regular. He always used to announce his profession.
Right.
He'd say, "Hi, this is so and so. I'm a CPA in Modesto, California."
Well, then there was the guy who would bend your ear for half an hour, and he'd say, "Well, no, say for example, I got this problem."
Say for example. That's right. Say for example.
And if either of you guys are listening, accept our apologies.
Yeah, we're sorry. We're sorry. And we also had an old lady who used to call a lot. A sweet old lady. Do you remember her?
Well, if you're talking about who I think, she's not that old. Myrna Larson is.
Yeah,
and I still am
that's right. She wasn't that old.
No, she's a retired doctor, so she's old enough to be retired. But I'm still in touch with her, and she's quite an interesting person.
She's very sweet.
Not only that, but Myrna is also a PowerBASIC customer.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
What a small world.
Well, Myrna is great, and the great thing about Myrna is that she would call, and unlike people that would call and say, you got a bug in your assembly routine, she would say, I found a bug in your assembly routine, but if you load it up, it's on line 43.
Right.
You see where you have the move, and you should be doing an add with carry, and she would debug the programs and fix it, and then call us and tell us what she did.
That's great.
So I have a lot of fondness for Myrna.
How about you, Bob? Any outstandingly humorous tech support calls?
Tech support is something I've been lucky enough to avoid for the past 10 years. I tell you, I have great fondness for our tech support guys. And incidentally, PowerBASIC tech support is, for the most part, free.
Yeah.
Almost all of our tech support is still absolutely free.
That's cool.
We only charge when a customer calls with a consulting type issue. Help me make this code faster.
Right.
Help me do something with the API that I don't understand about the API. But I truly have all the respect in the world for the tech support folks. They have a great deal more patience than I do. And I've been lucky enough to avoid it. So I don't have any real war stories to tell you anymore. But can't think of any.
Well, I had
it's been long enough. I'm sorry.
I got a tech support fax from a guy in Sweden once, I think it was, who said he started the fax by saying, Crescent Software, whatever, Ridgefield, Connecticut. I just want to tell you guys I've been using your tools for a long, long time, and I swear by them I wouldn't use any other tools. Dear MicroHelp. And then it was our chief competitor. Dear MicroHelp, I swear your tools are the greatest and this and that. I would never use any. So I wrote him back, Dear Gunther, and his name was Hans or something, you know.
Now he deserved that, yes.
Yeah.
If I can just say one thing, which is sort of related. Everybody thinks that DOS programming is dead, and in fact it's not. And the only point I want to make, I just wrote a huge program last year for a company that does hard disk data recovery.
Uh-huh.
And this was, really a major thing that got right down to the lowest level of the hard disk. And that kind of stuff has to be written in DOS. And there's a lot of things, and I'm sure Bob can give many more examples, because he's really in the thick of it, of stuff that is appropriate for DOS today.
Right.
Lots and lots of things.
Just because business software isn't written in DOS doesn't mean it isn't useful.
That's correct, and I still to this day sell some of the Crescent tools, the DOS stuff, and because after everything went to Windows, when Progress bought Crescent, they literally had no idea how to support the DOS stuff. They just didn't have anybody there that could do it, so they literally gave me back that part of the company. And to this day, I still sell things occasionally, and it's fun actually talking about that stuff and thinking about it and answering people's questions. I have to look back in the source code to see if it has some feature or not. But,
right.
Ethan, I couldn't agree with you more about DOS. It's amazing. Our DOS compiler still sells. Every day we sell copies of our DOS compiler.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And in fact, believe it or not, we are going to be releasing another version of our DOS compiler.
Wow.
We are upgrading our compiler, and there will be a PowerBASIC for DOS version 4.
Very cool.
Well, head over to your website and take a look.
Well, it's not there yet, but it will be.
Okay.
That's not today. That'll be later on this year, I presume.
Well, Bob, it was nice talking to you. I'm going to have to send you an email. We'll have to at least chat a little bit offline. And
must do that.
And if I ever get out there, I'll certainly want to come see you.
And I'd like to thank both of you guys for sharing this hour with me and the listeners. I'm sure you brightened everybody's day. This is just incredible stuff. Looking back and looking forward, I'm really looking forward to PowerBasic.net. Bob, you got my interest piqued severely.
Good. Yep. So stay tuned to PowerBasic.com.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys are titans in the world of BASIC.
Yeah, we owe a lot to you.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you to say those things.
Okay, well, take care.
All right, thanks a lot.
We'll catch you later.
All right, see ya.
Right, bye-bye.
Life is hard, pay my taxes.